Lehigh Valley Groundwater Management Agency at 3 o'clock on October 26. Call the roll, please.
Director Dabby,
Present.
Director Whitman,
Here.
Director Finch,
Here.
Director Kilby,
Here.
Chair Hayes.
I'm here. Okay, I want to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Yeah, pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Director announcements. Peter.
Nothing today.
Jim.
Nothing today. Nothing today.
Andy.
Nothing to report.
Bob.
Nothing.
Nothing. We griped about everything before the meeting. So. Okay, general manager comments.
Hello there. Well, I'm sure you guys all got the happy email I sent this morning, or I guess around noon, that DWR approved our groundwater sustainability plan. And they put out a news release as well. I think there were 17 basins that were approved. So now we get to start doing all the things in the plan. There are, it was a, 38-page letter that came with it with some recommended corrective actions. So I haven't had a chance to wrap my head around them yet, but they are not immediate. There are things that we have to do for the next plan update. So we'll work on them. I'll talk with Jordan and our consultants at DUDEC to find the best approach. So a lot of it is data gaps. So we'll figure that part out and then get going on it. The website also, new website was updated on Friday the 13th. So hopefully you've all had a chance to look at that. I think it's a lot cleaner and it is compliant with ADA for all the California requirements as well. So keep that going the way it is. I did also put a banner on the website today with the DWR announcement for the GSP. So there's like a news flash thing we can do at the top. So that's up there along with the actual letter from DWR. I've been looking at the quarterly statements that are mailed, and I know they're a source of frustration in the office because they're confusing and hard to follow, and people do the math wrong, and some things apply and some things don't apply. So I've been kind of revamping it to come up with I hope is an easier statement for people to follow with like if-then kind of statements, and when the groundwater sustainability fee applies and when it doesn't, things like that, the fees that everybody has to pay and the fees that don't apply if it's under half an acre foot per quarter. So hopefully we'll get something, I'll give it to you guys for feedback as well. And before, when the 2024 statements go out, we'll have something that's a little bit easier for people to follow. Right now, it takes a lot of phone calls when people do their math wrong or they overpay or underpay. It takes up a lot of time to get those squared away with people. And then I did get a sample RFP for auditing services from Casitas. So I'm going to work on getting an RFP from OBGMA out to get some accounting firms under contract to do the audits that we're missing and continue to stay up to date for those. Those are the things. Any questions or suggestions or?
So on your audit statement, when you said for or from Casitas?
It's a sample one that I got from Casitas.
Okay, from Casitas.
Yeah.
I understand.
That's all I have.
Okay. Next item, Jordan, basin report. By the way, the website really looks good.
Okay.
very easy to use.
Okay, thank you, Chair Aegis. And today came up with, as Jim likes to see, my favorite alliteration, and this one is, of course, the autumnal asymptote, meaning, of course, things calming down and reaching sort of an asymptotic level toward the bottom, as we like to say, the nadir, before we typically see a relatively quick jump in water levels in the basin. Especially when we have a brand new water year and 0.0 inches of precipitation over most of the watershed. We do have a record of 2 100ths down at the fire station over the past 3 weeks. And that's just enough to register as a trace on some of these gauges, but we'll see what the year brings. As far as the water levels in the basin go, we just replaced the logger and cable, so we've got a new reading system at the Key Well area, at the Alrod Well. As of today, we're at 87.36 feet below ground surface on a static condition, non-pumping. That's about 83% capacity, or 66,400 acre feet. What you'll notice, and every time I look at this graph, I seem like I notice something new. If we are approaching the nadir, we're still pretty close to as high as most of the peaks, or above it, of many of the years in the past. If you draw a horizontal line across the time span here to the left, we're, that 87.36 feet, there are years that don't even reach that on their peak in the spring. And this is the shallowest we've seen at any nadir. So we're still well above the historic conditions for a fall low. Another thing we notice is that, between April 12th, which is relatively early given how wet the year was, and today, we have about 50 feet of decline in the water level. And that's much more than we see in some years where we extract more groundwater. For example, that 2015, 2014, these years down here tend to be half of that of decline, even though the amount of water extracted was either similar or a little bit more in some of those drier years because there wasn't as much available Casitas water for much of the basin. But what we notice is that in the wetter years, 2005, 78, 93, et cetera, all of these tend to be a much larger drop, peak to nadir. And I suspect that has quite a bit to do with the shallower availability of water, increase in perched water system water, and maybe even the wraparound of the sponge being so full it can't take much more water in those time periods. And especially when we have such an early in the year peak. Many years we get that peak as late as July. But if we look at what's happening on the inflow as of this week, Gridley flowing in at about just under 7/10 of a CFS, Senior Canyon flowing in at about just under 3/10 of a CFS, but Thatcher, where we usually measure it at the bridge, is dry, as is Reeves. But the surface flow out is higher than you'd expect, actually, given all of that. Montgomery is about 2/10 of a CFS, and San Antonio Creek proper is over 6 CFS. And this somewhat surprised me because we're starting to see this, no precipitation, of course, and water levels in the main portion of the basin still declining. So a total recharge of 1 CFS and surface water outflow of 6.3. The artesian wells, the nuisance waters, and the perch system are certainly contributing to this. But what jumped out at me was with this 1.3 CFS increase last month to this month on outflow, doesn't sound like a lot, but that's over 1,000 gallons a minute that's flowing down more out of the basin this month than it was last month, okay? Or close to 1,000 as a good number. Whoops, where are we back? But the main portion of the basin continues to decline. That's 7.3 feet from September to October in the main portion of the basin at the Key Well. And we attribute this to autumn shorter days, plants becoming deciduous, taking up less, cooler nights, and a lot of that's happening on the perch system. And it's that very discrepancy that first pointed out to me as far as evidence for that disconnect. The perch system being something different than what we're getting in the main portion of the basin. How does that look in photographs? So last month to this month, things getting a little bit drier. At the inflow grade up at Ladera Road, this is where Senior Canyon and Gridley come together. Last month it looked like this, and a little bit more autumnal here, even if it's only in the color of the leaves that are approaching the grate, and a little bit less flow on the inflow side, not the outflow side. The outflow side has more. Where San Antonio Creek fully infiltrates is just about a football field's length downstream from the Spreading Grounds diversion point. This is actually on the Spreading Grounds Rehabilitation Project property where it goes through the San Antonio Creek right there. And if we zoom in on that very photograph, you can see that gray structure in the middle. That's the diversion structure. That is the gray wire screen that is allows the water to flow through when it can and does and should. Doesn't always do that, but that's the point. And we're about a football field south of that when San Antonio Creek fully infiltrates into the basin today. Last month, the point of exfiltrating groundwater was actually a little higher than it is here. In fact, the boulder, if I go back, that the GPS unit on is there, is just that one in the upper left-hand corner of the picture here. If you can see that, the cursor's right there, wiggling about on that boulder, and there's that boulder where the water is starting to exfiltrate today. But the flow is a little bit higher, and that would indicate again that while water levels may be declining, it's the uptake from the phreatophytes that's having a major contribution to the increase in flow we're seeing. And that speaks to the importance of the perch zone in the southwestern uppermost saturated zone. Down at the discharge point last month, this month, doesn't look a whole lot different. And if we zoom into the actual meter, when we're measuring this, there's a 1.5 feet per second, and that's gone all the way up to 1.7 this month. So the modern, or this week's measurement is in the foreground picture here now. All right, that's about it, just to keep it quick. Any questions?
Questions?
Yeah, I have a question. Looking at the storage, and looking at this report of 3,000 acre feet, if we didn't extract anything, how much are we gonna how much is gonna ooze out of this thing? How much do we lose just through percolation, through flow, through, I don't think we have any evaporation, but what do we lose? Because if we're only drawing down 3,000 acre feet a year, this thing is gonna be way down past 3,000 acre feet. This time next year. And so where does that water go?
So if we have no precipitation
Yeah.
and we take,
Or no extraction.
or no extraction,
Well, either way, if our extraction is 3,000 acre feet and we got 66,000 acre feet, we're not going to end up with 63,000 acre feet next year in September. So where does that go? It's below the perched.
right?
So it's not bleeding out laterally. So
And that's what shows, that's why the data from those drier years are important, because there's less of an effect in that total storage differential in the perch system. The perch system is taking in water from irrigation return flow, from septic systems, from sewer lines, from precipitation, from all that shallow groundwater. That's a totally different system
right.
than what we've got going here, and that's what's contributing to the stream flow out. Now, when water levels are very shallow, it can get what we call around the horn of the edges of the perch system, and it's so full that yes, groundwater's higher, but that can escape to the perch system. Once it gets down below that horn and is no longer around the horn, then it's 3,000 down. The first 3,000 that comes in replenishes that, and so on and so forth. Now, when we get less, it steps down within that main system. So even in the driest years that we've seen, where we have very little precipitation, we've still seen upwards of 2,000 acre feet of recharge come into the basin when waters from the headwaters, spring waters, and become surface flow or subsurface flow into the channels. That does recharge the basin, even without much rain. And over the course of years, it's all stair steps down or rapidly recharges and takes the elevator up. So the question of where does that water go? If it's below the Mason-Dixon line of being able to go around the horn, it's pumping only. And only when it gets up high does it spill. And that doesn't happen very often. But there still is perch system water contributing to the surface flows. And that's a totally different animal, totally different layer of the basin.
So 1 or 2 good rains and we'll be full again.
This year, if we had 1 or 2 good rains like we had this past year, you know, a 5 or 6 inch storm, especially if it's well timed in the season, potentially we could see artesian conditions again. And if we look to the past of, say, 2005 to 2006, 2005 very wet, 2006 almost spot on average year or a little bit below average of precipitation, we still had the return of artesian conditions in 2006.
Thank you, Jordan. The next item is public comments on items not on today's agenda. Are there any comments? Okay, hearing none. Item 7 is the consent agenda. Pleasure of the board.
I'd move.
I'll second.
And call the roll.
Director Danny,
Yes.
Director Whitman,
Yes.
Director Finch,
Yes.
Director Philke,
Yes.
Chair Hayes.
Yes. Okay, item 8A is proposed public hearing for groundwater sustainability plan fee increase. So the first action item is for the board to set the public hearing for November 30th, 2023 at 3 o'clock. Any discussion on that?
I have a public comment on that.
Okay.
Yours is on the whole thing, not just setting the date, right?
No, just the not the date. I don't have a problem with it.
Yeah, right now, we're just
I
setting
think we're
the
just trying to
date,
set the
yeah.
date, sorry.
We'll do that first, and then you can. There's no discussion, anyone have?
Do we have any statutory, you gotta have this many days and this many days and it's gotta be before that? Or
Yeah,
can we
that's,
just,
so I attached a memo from Peter Candy, the agency's counsel, that kind of outlines what the requirements are in accordance with Prop 26. So once the public hearing is set, we will go through that process of publishing in the paper, and as well as if you approve the public notice, it'll go in the paper, it'll go on the website, and anyone who's requested to be notified by mail, we will send that out as well, all within the time frame that he's outlined, in order to take action at the November 30th board meeting.
excuse me, doesn't it say down here on item 10B, consider canceling November 30th?
Wait, what is that? Are you looking at the minutes from
That was
the
last
previous
month.
meeting? That was last month's minutes.
Oh, no, I know that.
But you're still having the November 30th. Oh, we decided to keep the November 30th
Okay.
meeting.
All right,
Yeah, it's Thanksgiving's the week before, so.
I'm fine.
All right, can I have a motion to set the public hearing?
Yeah, also move.
A second.
Call the roll?
Director Daddy?
Yes.
Director Whitman?
Yeah.
Director Finch?
Yes.
Director Philke?
Yes.
Chair Hages?
Yes. Okay, the next item is to approve the notice of public hearing and the publishing of the item in the newspaper. Anyone have any comments or questions on the notice? That isn't what you wanted to talk about either, is it? The finance part of it, yeah.
So again, Peter drafted up that notice of public hearing, so that's what would be published in the newspaper and posted on our website.
And we would publish the majority of this under the memorandum. Is that what we would be doing, using?
It's this separate attachment that
Okay.
says notice of public hearing at the top.
Farther back.
Yeah, I guess it is further
after-
back.
After Peter's memo.
Well,
Looks like that, Bob.
I guess that got past me, so.
Yeah, it's in
I
there.
didn't read that public notice, yeah, okay. So, hey, I'll move that we, adopt this and, publish it.
I'll second.
Call the roll?
Director Daddy?
Yes,
Director Whitman?
Yes.
Director Finch?
Yes.
Director Philke?
Yes.
Chair Hages?
Yes.
and Chair, now that I've said that, I would like to move back a little bit, if that's possible. Under the Ojai Basin Groundwater Management Agency memorandum on the second page, there's a paragraph on the back, and that would be, it's not marked. On the fourth line down, no, that's the wrong one, that's the 3,000 acre feet. We have a segment in here that has been talked about a number of times, and this is the first time I've seen it where it went ahead and decided to talk about de minimis again. And the discussion in here says de minimis, 2 acre feet or less, that the people are not charged.
Right?
That's correct.
That's correct.
No, it could be correct. I thought we had discussions that, am I talking the difference with wellhead fees, acre feet? I thought we had, everybody had at least an acre foot charge. So,
The groundwater sustainability plan fee only applies to people with more than 2 acre feet a year or more. That's one of the reasons I wanted to read you the statement, because it's not that clear on here.
okay, this may not be the time, but it would be interesting to know how many of our 180 wells are de minimis.
I thought it was like 13 or, I thought we looked at,
That's okay. I mean, we can go by this. I'm just saying,
because that's per sigma.
Yes.
The 2 acre feet is per sigma.
Right.
That's not us.
No, we charge everybody
The extraction fees, everybody still pays for. The groundwater sustainability fee is for 2 acre feet or more.
and so if you had a well and you were under 2 acres, what would be the least amount that you'd pay a year? You'd still pay for 1 acre foot, is that?
You would pay the wellhead fee, which is $65 flat per quarter. If you have a well recordation number, $5 per quarter. See, I have my, my new application.
Okay,
And then
260, okay.
There's also if you're metered or unmetered. So if you're unmetered, you go through a process of your irrigated acres times a crop factor plus the number of dwelling units times a dwelling unit factor.
Okay, I guess I'd raise another point. Didn't we discuss it sometime that everybody needed a meter? Everybody?
Yes.
We haven't achieved that yet.
Okay.
But they do, everyone pays $25 an acre foot. That's the OBGMA
Okay.
pumping charge. People under 2 don't have to pay the GSP fee.
I can see how it's confusing for people
Yes.
to keep up with all the fees and the different applications and get it right now.
Yeah, the minimum extraction fee is gonna be 0.5 acre feet minimum times the $25. So $12.50 per quarter is the minimum for extraction fees. And because it's low like that, they don't pay the GSP fee. So they pay $12.50 plus the $65, and if they have a recordation number, the $5.
Are we losing money on some of these just for the fees and the recording and all the calculation and the billing time?
I think it's not necessarily a case
Even
of
though we're
losing
breaking even.
money. I mean, when people are unmetered, we are trusting that they're giving us accurate numbers. It would be better if everyone was metered.
I yield. I'm fine.
Okay?
Yeah.
So if we're on the third item yet?
Yes.
The cost of service study. I know it was hard to read on the 8.5 by 11 that I gave you, so I printed out a larger version for you. There's larger versions out on the table also if anybody wants to see them. So I took the tasks from the groundwater sustainability plan over a period of 5 years, the estimated costs associated with them. Those are factored into the other attachment, which is more in color, which shows the estimated pumping. If we leave the GSP fee at $37, you can see in row 4 that we're in the red almost immediately. And then at the last meeting, you asked me to run the scenarios for 3,000, 3,500, and 4,000 acre feet a year. So that's what rows 5, 6, and 7 represent. Leaving the GSP fee at $37 for the current quarter that we're in, Q1 of 23-24, and then raising it to $75 starting January 1st, and then the out years, $100 per acre foot. And again, that's for the 3 different scenarios, 3,000, 3,500, and 4,000. That's what the cost of service study is representing. And you can show, or you can see, raising it to $75 puts us in the black right away, implementing that January 1st. The estimated expenses are from that 11 by 17 for implementing the GSP plan. And obviously we want to have the money in the bank before we spend it. So it gets us in the black. Even if we left the GSP fee at $37 and assumed 3,500 or 4,000 acre feet a year, we would still be in the red. The current fee is not sustainable at that pumping level, even assuming, a optimistic of 4,000 acre feet a year. And now that we have an approved groundwater sustainability plan, we'll get started on some of the tasks that are outlined in the implementation plan, as well as the actions that DWR recommends. Again, if it goes into effect January 1st, the quarterly statements will be January, February, March, and we won't actually see the revenue till April of next year.
Richard, I have some comments I'd like to make. Is this the appropriate place to make it?
Well, let's see if the board has any questions or comments, and then you can,
Thank you very much.
any questions or comments? That's okay.
Yeah.
We're pretty informal here.
Julia, when would we have to vote on all this? We'd have to, how much lead time, do we have statutory lead time?
The cost of service study, the action will need to be taken today to approve the cost of service part, because that's backup that we would post on the website, that people would have available in advance of the public hearing
November 30th.
on November 30th.
Any other questions or comments?
So, I don't want to preempt anything Larry might want to say. But I will say, similar to what I said, I'll reiterate what I said last time. I would rather level this thing out rather than stay low and then have to spike big time for the 25-26 year when our costs double, more than double, 2.5x. And eventually we will get to the straw that breaks the camel's back from an agricultural pumping standpoint. And you're probably getting there with these fees. But I'd rather flatline this to some degree or plan it rather than ramp it up suddenly, and you might have people just not pay that year and walk away in that given year. And as one of the people, that write pretty big checks to this organization, I think we can always, if we could in any way be successful lobbying our politicians to exempt some smaller districts when water basins are over 50, 60 something percent. A lot of this is just going to be paper that gets put on a shelf. A lot of this money is going to go to it. So I think this is the right decision to make, but I think we need to be diligent in trying to work for less expenses through tweaks in the regulations. Thank you.
Any other comments? Yeah, I agree with Jim. This $250,000 5-year report that we have to do, there's only one or two elements that we really need to address, and we certainly don't have to go deal with seawater intrusion and all the other things that are involved in this. We're not in overdraft, it's pretty obvious. Our demand is way down. So I think we should lobby to get some relief on what elements we have to spend money on. Whether it's water quality or dealing with service flows or whatever it is. And just concentrate on that instead of wasting a lot of paper on all these things that really don't affect us at all. Okay, Larry.
Can I consider having a car put in?
Sure.
I'm Larry Mihalis. I'm over on Carn Road. I think many of you know me. I used to attend these meetings every day. Every time we had a meeting, I didn't feel I spoke too much, but oftentimes I felt I wasn't listened to. That wasn't why I stopped coming. I stopped coming because of COVID. Then we had the Zoom. But I just came today because I was struck by the fee increase going from $37 per acre foot, because I remember when we paid $5 per acre foot, and then it went to 15, and then it went to 25, and then now we're at 37. We're going to go to 37 and the 75. I mean, it's really jumping. So it looks like by October 1st of 2024, we're going to be paying 20 times more per acre foot. And I'm concerned about the small family farmer, the grower. This is really going to hit us hard. We've been hit with all kinds of fees and taxes and one thing and another. And I'm looking at it from that perspective. And please understand, I understand what Sigma is. I believe I do. I understand the requirements. I know why we have to do this. But with, as far as these fees that we're paying, it's going to hurt a lot of people. And I would just respectfully request that the board would reconsider the proposal to make the GSP fees go into this line. I'm not saying we don't have to have an increase in fees. I respectfully request that. I understand the onus of fiduciary responsibility that this board has. Believe me, I understand that. And I just want you to know that you are representing and doing for us work that we can't do for ourselves, and I understand that too. But in doing this work, I would hope that the small family farmer wouldn't be injured in some ways. And as Jim Finch was saying, you know, some people are going to be pushed over. I had a dentist one time, and I asked him why did I? This isn't a make-up story. I asked him why did my tooth get cracked? He said it was probably the mashed potatoes. I said, what are you talking about, the mashed potatoes? He said, well, you had, 40, 50, 60 years. That was a long time ago for me. I guess I'm 75 now. And he said, yeah, it's 40, 50 years, whatever. He said, I'm making this number up. But he said, you had continuous trauma over all those years eating nuts and bones and all the things that you chew on. And then last night you had the mashed potatoes, and that was the straw that broke the camel's back. And so I don't think we want to break the camel's back. That was basically the gist of what I wanted to say. So I'd like to think that there'd be some other avenues. There could be periods of waiver, like I think Jim Finch was discussing here or suggesting. Maybe I misunderstood. Or there could be some help we could get from the legislature, perhaps to match dollar per dollar with what's required from us to keep us alive. It's not just for us, the Ojai Basin, but for the San Joaquin Valley and for the Coachella Valley and for all the other valleys that produce produce. This is a very strong produce producing state, and this will hurt a lot of people. It may not hurt the corporate industries, and the corporations may end up taking people over, and people around here, I'm not going to talk anymore. I'm going to waste your time. But I just would like you to reconsider it. Reconsider the progression. Reconsider the progression. I think that would be very helpful. I respectfully ask that. Thank you for allowing me to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. Bill?
I think, some really good points there made. First of all, congratulations, the DWR approval. I certainly, as you know, I probably appreciate that as much as anybody. I remember that trip we made up to Sacramento to talk to DWR, and it was, anyway, long run going, wonderful job. Congratulations. And really important. More important than most anybody realizes in terms of standing up to the rights of this valley, so thank you. If we're asking for relief, we need to have the best button-down shop, the best case put forward when we're asking for that relief. And I would submit that resolving this metering issue would be part of putting our best foot forward, making the best case. We still have a situation where we don't really know, technically, how much water is being pumped by unmetered wells. Technically, we don't know. I think that's an accurate statement. Until everything's metered, how do we know? And in terms of making the case that you're talking about, Board Member Finch, I think that it would really help to be able to present the fact that we actually know precisely, because we have a proper regimen in place, that every well that's not shut in, every well that's permitted to operate, that's not listed as shut in, is metered. And we have that report, and we know exactly what's coming out of that well. And if you go through with this, that's probably needed, and I understand the concerns and all of that, and you increase the incentive for not reporting accurately and not having a meter, you could make the problem worse. So I would urge you to really think of a default position where after all this time of we have something on the books that you're supposed to be metered, and if you haven't metered, there's some sort of default position that financially it makes sense for you not to continue until you have shown that you're metered. In other words, the financial incentive should be there to get the meter in. And I would urge you to really address that situation, and this would be a good time to do it. That's just my thought. Thank you.
Board members?
Question, because I've heard a few different numbers. We have an interval and we have to do a new report. And a new report's gonna be pretty much exactly the same as the report we just got done doing 5 years from now. And it's gonna cost us, what, $200,000 or $300,000 for 3,000 acre extraction a year, even if we're at 4,000 extraction a year. That's $66 an acre foot in paperwork. And as you said, it's gonna sit on the shelf. So instead of talking about this, will the chair appoint an ad hoc committee to come up with some type of preliminary parameter for an appeal and get to our assembly and Senate to see if we can get some traction? Because that's a hell of a lot of money for a very, very, very tiny basin that uses an incredible amount. And so would we want to say, if you're over 50%, if you would extract less than 5,000 a year, acre feet a year, we want to have an exemption until we go outside of one of those parameters. We either dip and then we have to file, or we draft and we've exceeded that threshold, and then it would be a reason for us to resubmit. But just wasting money for a non-read report, a dust catcher, it's pretty tough on the smallest people, I think. And so I think that since we're aware that it is something that's never ending, I think we ought to start now. It's not going away. And we should just start now because it's coming up. We know we've got this bill waiting for us in the future. And that's my request, that we start doing something now, and we report and we get on it, and we do what we did before with Golden State Water, and we move the water issue along in a positive way. So that's my thought.
Any other comments?
I have some thoughts that I wanted to share to address some of the public comments as well. So a couple of the first tasks in the implementation plan, one is to evaluate what it would take to meter everyone who's not metered. So that's one of the first things that we could, get started on right away. The other one was to explore grant funding opportunities. We did submit a grant application and we were not successful. So that's still out there, that we can look for grant opportunities. I've been in the water industry for a long time. I don't know if you guys are familiar with urban water management plans. That's also a report that's required every 5 years if you meet certain criteria, a certain number of customers or a certain number of acre feet per year.
Yeah, 3,000.
Yeah, I mean, OBGMA is not required to do it. Casitas is, and when I was a consultant, I had lots of clients who were required to prepare them. It's kind of something you have to check the box off that you completed this every 5 years. If you don't complete it, you aren't eligible for grant funding. That's one of the first things that they ask. If you are up to date on your, whatever plans your agency is subject to, you have to have that box checked in order to even consider applying for grant funding. So it's a little bit of a catch-22. We need the grant money, but we have to pay for the plan update with our own money, and then when you get a grant, you're supposed to shell out the money first, and then you get reimbursed. So it's a lot of playing around with balancing the activities and meeting the state's requirements.
So I'm not advocating not doing the report. I'm with Bob. You know, if you can work it through the political channels and get the exemption ahead of time. And, you know, I fully agree with Bill. I think we could quickly prove, because we had a little bit of a discussion on pump sizes and meters, and I think we were down in that, you know, there's 20 or 30 that it was de minimis in a, you know, not the 2 acre feet, but just a small amount, whereas, you know, 5 of the wells are paying 40% of it. And the biggest bang is out making sure that the 80% of the wells are paying, because the last 20 are not carrying even 5%. I forget what it was. But anyway, I agree with everything that's been said, and I think we can work that easy and work the but we've got to be prepared, and that's the unfortunate part in getting prepared. But if we build the reservoir of money, the reserve of money, we do have the ability then to back way off on our things and coast on what we've built. And so it goes towards that, well, we've got this 437 budgeted number in today's dollars, and given inflation, it'll probably be higher than that. So, you know, you could go 75, and then, but I think I'm comfortable with proceeding, and then, but making the pledge similar to what Casitas did on 218 hearing, when they had built-in increases and they didn't implement a year or two's worth of increases, but they had done something. They'd laid the homework. So it's not the ideal scenario, but.
Yeah, and I think we've been under the gun for the last year and a half to try to get this thing done and get it in and comply with the law. And then I was really not very optimistic that it was going to be approved, to tell you the truth, you know, because it took so long. I mean, they waited till the last minute, and ours seemed to be relatively simple compared to some of the ones they dealt with. But I think one strategy we might consider is as we develop these reports that we're going to have to do in the near future here, is start looking at developing an argument for why we have achieved sustainability. I mean, there's 5 areas of sustainability that we have to report on, and we have sustainability on at least 2 of those without doing anything. So I think if we can develop that argument that we have achieved it, we don't have to wait 20 years. If we've achieved it, we can stop doing some of these things that they're going to require us to do. And I don't think it would be that difficult. We're not in overdraft. I think we can demonstrate that fairly easily. There's no seawater intrusion. We can demonstrate that.
No subsidence.
No subsidence. And water quality that may be really the only one we might have to do a little work on in certain areas of the basin, but it's not that complicated.
Because the Swazi is always not great. The other groundwater.
Yeah, you're either too shallow or too deep, but right in the middle, you're Goldilocks.
Yeah.
And that's on the water quality side. I almost wish that we could say, hey, DWR, we don't want to present an alternative demonstration of conditions holistically being not in need of a groundwater sustainability plan, but can we just focus on surface water groundwater interaction and focus on groundwater dependent ecosystems and water quality and focus on that alone? And that would cut some of these numbers significantly.
Yeah.
And that might be a fallback position to, hey, legislator, can we just do away with this requirement, which is small, which would be nice, but again, I'm not that lobbyist.
Well, I'm not that familiar with the language of the bill, but is there some measure where it says we've reached sustainability? I mean, they want us to do that in 20 years. Well, if it doesn't take 20 years, can we say we did it? It's sustainable for that element. And that couldn't be part of our report. And if they accept the report,
I have to look and see what the metrics are for that. And see what it would take
Okay.
to determine that.
And Julia, with the urban plan, we ended up peeling back Golden State. They went ahead and did the plan. They charged us 85 grand.
I know all
Except
about it.
we didn't use 3,000 acre feet, except we didn't have 3,000 users. So we were exempt and went after them and got our money back. And so what I would hope we would do is be able to come up with some type of similar program that says if you're within these parameters, you don't have to do this. Again, no subsidence, no intrusion, no overdraft, no water quality. If we don't have them and we've met it, then just wasting hundreds of thousands of dollars is costing the small growers. And maybe what we need to do is have all the small growers write letters and help us with Bennett and Limon and have them sponsor some legislation that will say, look, you're under the 5,000 acre feet. When you get there or you have a different issue, then you're going to have to go through the drill. Because I don't see us changing significantly. I don't see anything moving very much at all. And it hasn't over years.
Other than if costs get too high, the economics of agriculture have been very poor. You could see 3,000, you could see the water usage drop.
yeah.
And maybe that's it. Maybe it's the annual report metric that establishes you don't need a 5-year update because your annual reports show you are sustainable.
Yeah.
That you've met those metrics, and maybe that's the way to go.
Yeah.
Because we've demonstrated what we've got in the groundwater sustainability plan. We're implementing those measures, and our annual reports are documenting those measures as successful, and that we are sustainable.
And that was kind of where I was going with thinking, okay, it's not until there's some trigger level from your annual reports.
Right.
You're exempt until you trigger. And then if you build a reservoir, a reserve, keep thinking in terms of water. That you're prepared to take, but anyway, I think we're talking off the top of our heads, but we're all talking the same way. With some more thought put into it, it'd probably be more.
And I'll restate my request. I wish the chair would put an ad hoc committee and get some people on this and test the political waters and take a look at the different parameters of urban and see some of these other things where you do have exemptions and see if we can't come up with some type of a similar model to say it works okay here, it should work okay for this. And then let them know that, the burden goes on the farmers. This is direct farm burden, period. And it's a direct food product burden, period. It's direct ratio. And it accomplishes nothing.
So, the city has had a very good experience with Bennett helping us with one of the agencies. And, wasn't Bennett himself, it was his staff. But they, helped us with the right questions to ask and the right things to say. I mean, I think we should approach Bennett and have him, kind of maybe explain to us, like we're searching around here today, what it is that we would need to do in order to get the ability to back off some of this reporting. And, maybe he's got answers for us and maybe he doesn't. But my experience with him, at least on the issue the city was dealing with, he was very supportive and helpful. Not that he was getting them, the agency to change their mind, but just get us to ask the right questions and provide the right information.
And I think the right question might be this. We go to them and say, why is it so critical to have the report? And then when they lay out the parameters, they say, we don't have any of these issues. Make them show us what and why and how it's important.
I think the one gentleman has his hand up.
Oh,
Oh, I don't know.
is there anyone in the public that had any comments that's online?
Well, I just wish I was here from the very beginning, but other than that, you guys are doing great. You're asking all the right questions and talking about all the right stuff. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Well, we don't have an item to take action on that particular issue today.
No, I
But
got
we can
that.
put it on the next agenda, and if you want to think about who wants to volunteer to be on such a committee, and maybe develop a strategy on how we're gonna go about this. And I think Jordan's comments about making that annual report a meaningful report that, unveils to the state what our strategy is and where we believe we're at, so that, we're not, just going along with what they're planning on doing to us. Because we're playing the same game that Fox Canyon's playing, is a giant groundwater basin with thousands of users, and they're having to do the same thing we do is ridiculous, so.
That's kind of across the board with the state agencies. They got one size fits all, and a lot of it doesn't fit Ojai very well.
No, a lot of it, yeah.
Are there other basins that are similar to Ojai?
I'm sure there are.
Yeah,
The closest one, I think, in size and tributary area is Barvin. It's relatively small, and it has a whole host of other issues. They're higher elevation, drier. So there are some analogs that we could look into. But I think the idea of using our annual reports to demonstrate that we are sustainable, that we've met these metrics. Our 2024, 2023 annual report could have a recommendation. May we please push this 5-year requirement for an updated GSP out
yeah.
indefinitely while we demonstrate sustainability with these annual reports.
One of the corrective actions in the letter that they sent with the GSP approval was number 3, that talks about sustainable management criteria. That includes minimum threshold exceedances, triggers, like you were talking about, Jim. So that could be, again, developed for the next annual report and included in there.
Yeah, demonstrate we're over 6 on those
Yeah.
triggers and have not exceeded those thresholds.
Yeah.
Therefore, thou art sustainable.
Okay. As far as this rate increase, I think, Jim talked about how we don't want to keep bumping this thing up every year, because we really don't know what the future holds for us. But we have been in very serious financial condition for quite some time, just barely staying afloat. So trying to build some reserve in the next 2 years, I think is important. And after that, if we can taper this thing down, maybe we can level those rates off or even reduce them. Any other comments or questions? Need a motion to approve the cost of service analysis.
So moved.
Second.
Call the roll?
Yes.
I firsted and second.
Director Daddy,
Yes.
Director Whitman,
Yes?
Director Finch,
Yes.
Director Filkey,
Yes.
Chair Hayden.
Yes. All right, well, thank you, everyone. We are, if there's no other comments, we are at 4 o'clock.
You seconded.
I firsted.
He firsted it.
I firsted.
Andy seconded it.
Second was this direction.
Andy.
Yeah.
So,
No, Whitman?
with
I
Bennett's
gotta change my
interest,
dental appointment, I realized.
I would think he'd be
I have
very
it at 2 o'clock on the 30th.
Well, he was a big proponent of this whole thing, so,
What's that?
but,
Yeah.
you know, there's gotta be some
But if you're getting, you know,
reasonable
Bye, Peter.
differentiation between Fox Canyon and us, you know?
right. But I have to, you know, I have to stop it the longer that we can keep these farmers operating, the better. So, and I think Bennett's gotta be
I would
interested in
think so,
that
yeah.
too.
Although his wealth bill wasn't. You know, the thing I don't get is why, once you write an annual report, you're not just plugging in a few numbers and maybe a quick paragraph. Even the annual report at $20,000.
Should do something.
No, it should be fine. It should be 10, 10 grand. Plug in the basin levels in. I mean, that was the thing. I had to do a 5-year follow-up on mitigation. I hired biologists the first year.